This week's show is brought to you by Media Temple. Whether you're looking to migrate a business-critical site or application to the cloud, Media Temple is your trusted team. Their experts can help you move to the cloud, maximize application performance, and find peace with your infrastructure once you're there. Visit MediaTemple.net to learn more about all of their managed cloud services and to unlock the full potential of your virtual private cloud or the public cloud.
Today's presenting sponsor is Datadog. If your business is being driven by software, you know today's applications are more complex than ever. They're sitting on multiple layers of infrastructure and distributed services, and it can be very complicated to manage. Datadog brings visibility into every part of your infrastructure, as well as APM monitoring for your application's performance. Customizable dashboards, collaboration tools, and alerts let you develop your own workflow for observability and incident response. And Datadog integrates seamlessly with all of your apps and systems, from Amazon Web Services to Kubernetes to MySQL, so you can get visibility in minutes. You want to get started now? Go to datadog.com/cloudcast to get started with Datadog and get a free t-shirt. Datadog is trusted by thousands of enterprises. So if you haven't tried Datadog at your company or on your side project, go to datadog.com/cloudcast to try it out and get a free t-shirt. And now, on with the show.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are both coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Aaron, how are you this morning?
Doing good. It is a little bit earlier than our usual recording time, but it was absolutely worth getting up for our guest this week.
Yeah, you're up, you're caffeinated. We, one of the things that we've been very lucky to have is we have a global audience, which is very cool. We have listeners from around the world, and so thank you to everybody who listens. But we've been a little bit slack about getting guests from around the world, and I think sometimes we would benefit from some perspectives on, how cloud computing and some of these technologies are being adopted around the world. And so today we're very, very lucky to have Thuru Vijay Kumar. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being on, Thuru, this morning, or actually this evening for you.
Hi. Nice to be with you, guys.
So you're coming to us from Sri Lanka. How are things out there today?
Yeah, it's good, actually. It's almost end of the day and evening. Nice weather.
Yeah.
It's good.
And for those of us in the United States who are not great at geography, give us a sense, where is Sri Lanka on the map? Where are you in the world? Yeah,
Sri Lanka, actually, it's the country situated in Indian Ocean, just little below India, so you can spot that island, a small island. So from the geographical point of view, so that's where we are located, and we have a population of 21 million people here.
Very good. Well, cool. Well, thank you for being on this morning. So, give us a little bit of your background. You kind of came on our radar because you've written a very good book lately about developing applications, sort of modern applications on top of Azure. But give us a little bit of your background. Give us a little bit of some of the technologies and types of things that you've been working on, and a little bit around why you decided to write a book as well.
So I started working in the industry from 2008, and I've been following it up to now. So I started as a software developer, so worked with different languages, Java, J2ME, then moved to the .NET stack. Then thereon from 2010 to 11, from the early stages of Azure, I started using Azure, being part of Sri Lanka Microsoft. And I work with cliently ranging mostly the current company that I'm situated is Tikri Corporation, so which is headquartered in Singapore. And we have a cliently altogether mostly from Scandinavian countries, Norway, Sweden, and Australia. And previously I have worked with clients from Thailand and Russia.
Interesting.
So
fantastic.
Most of my works, currently I'm solutions architect in Tikri. So currently I work with the business stakeholders and the development team to put on down these solutions, especially on cloud, and how they can use these cloud technologies and adapt to the cloud. And maybe some are a bit hesitant to move to the cloud. So we see a different dimensions on each geographies and how different countries are adapting the cloud in different ways.
And Thiru, what attracted you to Azure? Is it the .NET development background, or what was the attraction there versus, say, AWS or some of the other large public clouds out there?
Yeah, so yes, exactly. The .NET development background initially attracted me on Azure. So I started in 2011 working on Azure. So those times it was in a very baby stages. So it has only 3 services by that time: virtual machines, cloud services, and the storage. So during that time, I was working a bit closely with Microsoft Sri Lanka. So we were one of the advocates of promoting Azure. So that's the first stages of why I really jumped into Azure. But there are some certain projects, actually, I have worked with AWS as well. So if you take Sri Lanka as a country, within Sri Lanka, I see a parallel adoption for both AWS and Azure in the equal range. And some organizations are using Azure and some are using AWS.
So give us a sense. You're lucky enough you get to work, like you said, you work with sort of the Asia Pac rim, so down into Australia, but you're also working with some clients in Russia, up in the Scandinavian countries, but also around the Sri Lanka and Indian markets. Give us a sense of what are some of the trends that are happening in your parts of the world, both in terms of some of the technologies people are using, some of the common use cases, or even just trends in how people are learning all these new technologies?
So if you take Sri Lanka, so in any cloud adoption, actually, I see a very common pattern. So initially, a large organization or a business wants to move to the cloud. So initially, they consider this cloud adoption as mostly into a lift and shift mode. So they have these VMs or the application running in their own data centers, so they want to just put it in the cloud. It's either Azure or AWS or any public cloud. So that's the majority of the adoption I see in Sri Lanka. So, but writing cloud native applications using very specific services of cloud and using the platform models of the cloud, actually it's in the beginning stages when it comes to Sri Lankan IT industry or the Sri Lankan companies. But if you just take the same in the Scandinavian market, especially that I heavily work with Norwegian clientele, so the adoption is very high. So they are using very, very native cloud technologies, which even on the other hand, even provide a disadvantage of cloud lock-in. So, but most of the clientele is in Norway, so they are very specific to moving to the cloud, and they have their evaluations done right. And they have very broad understandings in terms of data governance and application handling and all the pricing models. So they have the flexibility, and also they want to be more cloud native rather than just running on the VM.
And you've mentioned both lift and shift and cloud native there for different parts of the world, if you will.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about the business demands and use cases that are driving the underlying technology decisions and what kind of applications that those are in each of those categories, please.
Yeah, so if you take lift and shift, so that's one of the apparel providers, actually. They have the collateral applications around their main ERP systems. So these applications are also a bit legacy if you consider the technologies they are written on. So desktop-based applications, and some are old web-based applications. So they have their own limitations to be moved or rewritten on the available PaaS technologies. So they use these very traditional storage systems. So they have their own cost allocated with that on moving to the PaaS. So those kind of applications, people, because of the cost factor involved in the rewriting, prefer the lift and shift. But mostly these SMEs and the startups, or even a startups projects around big enterprise, they prefer writing the cloud native applications, utilizing the cloud services for the benefit of cutting down the development time and moving forward on a very fast-paced delivery mode. Example, if you take the recently I have been seeing high adoption on the serverless market, which is either it could be AWS Lambda or Azure Functions and serverless logic apps. So it definitely cuts down lots of development time in terms of tooling and the workflows that we define. But of course, it comes with the disadvantage of they are locked in with the particular provider. But since they are startups and they want to go to the market very soon as possible, and they just want to validate the concept and reiterate. So those kind of business cases, going native cloud applications really helps because it cuts down the development time and the price is lower and they get the feedback sooner.
So in the cases where you're seeing these people go cloud native, or you mentioned them looking at going serverless, what's the driver there? Are there certain types of applications? Is it a mobile application, an IoT application? I mean, what's the jumping right to serverless is a pretty big jump for people. What's driving them there beyond just kind of lower cost? Is there a certain type of application you're seeing or a pattern of applications?
When it comes to serverless, mostly it's IoT-based application, as you mentioned. Okay. But there are some interesting cases, actually. One of the financial, a fintech application, which API gateway is backed by serverless. So that was one of the technical decisions we made recently, which actually gave us a very good cost reduction in terms of the development time and going to the market. Because this is a bit of a enterprise system. It's not an IoT, it's not a mobile application, but they just want to provide a very robust API gateway for the external developers, which talks to internally to lots of legacy systems. So that trigger we made using serverless, because one of the main technical decision was because we can just go to the market soon and check what is really required by these developers. And the business reasons why, the supportive business reasons why I chose serverless is because of the cost benefits. Because that's serverless is one of the benefits actually these public cloud vendors came up with because of the economies of scale. So even when we call PaaS or platform services, any public cloud provider provides, the pricing comes with chunks. So each chunk is priced. But for most of the serverless computational pricing, comes with the usage. The way you use, you pay. Yeah. So that economies of scale is really good. And also the development effort. So the tooling which comes alongside with these serverless modules, like it could be AWS Workflow, Azure Logic App. So it's just a drag and drop of modules. So you can easily test it and turn it around in the evening. And again, next morning you do something different. So it's quickly you validate. So that's one of the another benefit of serverless.
So it's really a combination of both velocity and cost savings, if you will. Now, let me ask you this: what are some of the core technologies then that you're using these days? And the reason I ask is because we always have a challenge on this show of, okay, how do you really keep up with everything? Because whether it's AWS or Azure or really any of the public clouds, they started out with a core set of services, but then they grew this catalog to the point. Are they using services? Are you using containers? And what kind of technologies are you really seeing these days?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So as I mentioned, in 2011 and 12, during those days, if I remember, Azure just had only three items in the catalog, but now they have more than 100. So, and also since these new stuff are getting added to the catalog, its technology decision making is really have become very tough, because always the other technology looks better than the other, and also it comes with its own pros and cons. So one thing actually we do as a company in Tikri, actually we have a technology radar, so where we scan out these technical inputs and we just plot it. And with our architectural team, we decide what to adapt and what to test and what to assess. The technologies actually we have been assessing, and we have the experience we just put into the customers. And also the concepts like containers or the microservices or these serverless. So these things are being adapted based on the use cases. For example, if a new term like serverless coming into the market, before adapting it, we do have our own research doing serverless computing on a POC of a particular client or maybe on a dummy application. And we do run our own scaled tests and load tests on that. Then only we just try it out on a slow-paced adoption mode. Slow-paced adoption mode in the sense, if a customer is already there, we don't just go and shift the entire application to a concept like serverless, or let's go and use this technology. We just take a chunk of it, we take a small vertical and we'll try it out with that. And based on the feedback and the adoption patterns actually we get, then we started moving across the organization. So that's how it typically happens.
And was that then the a lot of the thought process was that what went into the book? A lot of learning these technologies, testing them out in environments before you roll them out to customers, and then that went into the book?
Exactly. So the book is written exactly in that way. So if you really take the book, there is one single application which starts in my first chapter, and there are 8 chapters. Across these 8 chapters, each chapter, this application adapts a new technology based on some evaluations. So we actually expand an architecture. So architecture also is an architectural runaway. So we fix the components right, and we try to adapt it. And for the existing application, we take a slice of a vertical and we adapt it. Even for the mobile, actually, sometimes we do that.
I want to ask a question. We're kind of spoiled here in the United States when we deal with the public cloud providers in that their data centers are, somewhat locally located. So we don't run into the issue of an application is in the United States and the data might be somewhere else. How do you manage? So obviously a lot of the providers, whether it's AWS or Azure or anybody, is putting data centers in more and more locations, but they're not in every country, right? They've just gone into the UK, but they might not be in Germany, or they might not be in Norway versus Sweden. How do you guys manage that in terms of kind of the country specific data sovereignty laws? Where data has to reside and proximity to the data centers. Like, walk us through that process where you have to sort of figure out how close am I to a public cloud data center? What are the laws around where my data resides? Kind of give us a sense of how some of that works, or how you have to think about it.
Yeah, that's so. If most of the Scandinavian customers actually we use the European data centers, but of course that comes with a problem when it comes to the DR plans. When we want to replicate the data or the geo replications we do, they have their own restrictions. Though there are data centers outside their country, they don't want to put that outside the country. So those comes with certain regulations. And some countries, actually, recently one of the customers from Dubai, so we couldn't move to the cloud because they want the data center inside their country, so not inside the region, so the data center should be inside the country. So in those cases, actually, of course, is a miss of cloud adoption. So it comes in, as you mentioned, data governance and sovereignty issues. So that is still a problem. But also, having said that, I have also seen a wide range of adoption and acceptance in the cloud, mainly when it comes to data, because some of the Australian customers, which are huge enterprises, they are okay to have their DR or the backup plans copied to Southeast Asia, which is technically in Singapore data center. So Azure recently opened in Australian region. So before that, they were okay to run that in their Singapore data centers, and then they moved to the Australian data centers. So it's a mix. It's based on the business context and their laws. And most of the organizations who are dealing with very sensitive informations, personal informations, and especially the financial informations, they are not willing to put the data outside their countries. But other startups and other organizations who deal with real estate and other sort of businesses, they are pretty much flexible on keeping their data outside the organization.
Give us a sense. I want to dive into the book a little bit more. So, you took the time to write the book, which is a huge undertaking above and beyond, your day-to-day job. What are some of the things that people can expect to get from reading the book? Some of the sample applications in there, or what are some of the things that if you were to hand this off to a colleague, you go, look, this is what you're going to benefit from. Give us a sense of what was your goal in this in terms of helping people to learn things, and what were some of the things that you learned just from going through the process of writing it and having to sort of learn it as you go?
So actually I was approached by the publisher to write a book. Actually, they got the introduction through my blog. Okay. So initially I had a bit of a hesitation whether to write, whether I have the time with the job. And later I did a scan on how you can find more than 100 books about Azure. Even if you search on a specific topic, you can find thousands of blogs and lots of books. But one concern I had was actually, even which I have seen widely within the company and also in other organizations, people don't see any cloud platform or any technology as a tool to give a solution. So they say, if you take AWS, they say, okay, AWS has this AWS S3, and they go from top to bottom of the S3 and they talk all the technical details of S3 or maybe Redshift. Or if you take any service from Azure, that's they do. So there are technical documentations and technical how-to books are available. But if you really put a real-world problem, for example, you are going to create an IoT solution for a farming startup. So then it's not only a one particular technological service that you use to create that solution. You connect lots of bunch of services in one particular cloud platform, or maybe you use several other services also to provide that solution. So that's the basic idea of this book. So this idea came as creating a multi-tenant based document management portal. So that's this book address. So it includes everything from how to set up the environment and how you set your code environment, how to create your branches, development, set up the development team, and handling the documents and encrypting them, how to manage your keys, how to use search the documents, and how can you generate some reports, how you handle the administration. So it handles different aspects of the entire solution. And when to choose a NoSQL service and when to choose a relational service, when to go for a search service and search-driven architecture. So it's lots of things goes into building a solution rather than just talking, okay, one technology service. So that's the differentiator or the USP of this book actually I came up with. And my book really targets on developing that one particular application. So this entire 8 chapters keeps on improving that one particular application as a solution point of view. So that's the input for the developers or the readers that I'm trying to give. So they get a holistic view of how they can use Azure to create a solution on top of Azure. So if you're really looking for a input or a content, I want to get to the advanced level of one particular service of Azure. Of course, my book is not the right choice. So for example, if you say that they want to learn about storage services or search service of Azure from top 1 to 0 or 1 to 100, then it's not the right book. But it gives the right information for you to how to choose a search service and how you decide what to choose, how to adapt it in your existing application, and what are the high-level things it can provide with some basic code samples. So then that's the right choice for the book.
No, you bring up a great point there, because a lot of the books that I've read and a lot of the documentation I've read is exactly that. It's nice to have more of a solutions and architecture approach versus a product deep dive approach. But you also mentioned, this was fascinating to me, how to kind of line up the process and how to line up a little bit of the internal teams and the culture. And I wanted to explore that very quickly as well. Tell me a little bit about, from your certainly a more global perspective, what kind of adoption has to happen internally in a lot of those companies when it comes to like a culture and process standpoint?
And before you jump into that, Aaron, I'll throw out one little tidbit. We told people before I was doing this roadshow with Gene Kim, one of the things, and this is what I like about the book, like it's very solution oriented. It kind of walks through things in depth. One of the things people would tell us all the time about Gene's book, The Phoenix Project, was it wasn't just a toolbox book. It didn't just, tell me technically. It kind of built a story. It was something that could be explained as more than just CLI. And so I think especially as we're getting into all these sort of changing technologies, it's important to be able to convey that in a way that's not just let me go in depth on some technology, but let me weave in the business aspect of it, the people aspect of it. So I don't want to mean to interrupt, but I wanted to throw that out as a tidbit because I think we're seeing it more and more. People want that sort of way to communicate.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the book is overall the holistic solution approach, as I mentioned. When it comes to the team orientation or how we set the culture about the team, and the second chapter of this book is all about how you. So the chapter starts like this. Actually, I start with a problem introduction, and okay, this is the problem we are going to solve. And then it starts from purchasing an Azure account and then moves on. So one developer gets a problem and then he gathers a team and how he heads up the source code and how he builds the continuous integrations, development and test cases and the DevOps practices. So the second chapter is entirely dedicated for how we set this continuous delivery and continuous integration DevOps culture into the team. So when it takes Tikri again as an example, this is actually a learned lesson within my organization because we have these small teams working across the countries, because some teams have developers in Sri Lanka and also they have some developers working in Norway and Australia. So there's a time differences, there is a cultural difference. So we all get together and manage these things, and we have these daily meetings and the code check-ins and the peer reviews, how these things should happen. So it's a cultural change. Of course, we sometimes feel a bit of a high friction situations when we introduce new developers who has no experience in working across these time zones. But overall, actually, as an organization, we have a very transparent practice, and we take our retros very seriously, and we jump into that, and we, much as possible, we keep the teams divided into smaller, much as possible, into 3 to 4 people. Even in bigger projects, we have this sub-teams concept. So 3 to 4 people is the max, and they have their own work models and own Jira tasks. So that's one of the approach we have to easily adapt it without much of a friction. So that's a learning, and that input is actually just pumped into the second chapter of this book, and how we technically handle this in terms of the tools of collaboration and tools of testing, the CI and CD platforms. That's what's available along with Azure and VSTS.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense when you split up the teams to sort of keep them a little bit geographically not isolated, but that function stays in an area. Because I know from having done development in the past, when we had lots of time zones and so forth, it makes it hard if you don't see the people you work with. You create friction if you split work between time zones that is 3 or 4 hours different, and people are waiting on somebody else before they can move on theirs. It makes it hard. So. I think that's important, Aaron. I think one of the big things I hope people take away from today's show is, we live in this global world these days. The projects that you're going to work on, most likely won't be one country bound. I think there's a lot of interesting things that Thuru talks about that people can kind of glean from this in terms of how you organize your teams, how you have to think about where data is going to reside, because it may not be in a local data center. Yeah, no, that stuff is very, very interesting. So let me wrap this up with maybe one last question. As you're sort of looking ahead a little bit about how technology is kind of impacting kind of you as a global citizen and dealing with lots of different cultures around the world, how do you think about dealing with all of them? Obviously, you have to deal with all of them, but do you have a way of thinking about the pace that the Scandinavian countries move versus Asia Pacific versus something else, or are you just like everybody else, you're trying to keep up with it as quickly as you can?
Yeah, actually, that's a very interesting question. So each country and each business have their own pace of using the technology. But overall, what I see these days, actually, almost all the business discussions end up using 2 terms. I can honestly say, actually, 90% these days they use machine learning and AI and microservice. Even without context of understanding them, actually, I can pretty much see almost across all the countries, these business stakeholders using these technologies. So one thing is actually the more and more the business stakeholders are moving or getting aware of at least the high level things of technology. So that is one of the things I personally see as happening globally across. I think you might be having your personal experience as well now on that. Earlier, business stakeholders think, okay, technology is something aside and we work aside, but now the overall adoption is there. And when it comes to different countries, my personal opinion, actually, Scandinavian countries, especially when it comes to Norway and Sweden, they have a very high rate of adoption toward cloud when it comes to cloud PaaS adoptions, and they are going on a very, very promising adoption pattern. But if you take Australia, they have a very high adoption of cloud, of course. But when it comes to the application development side, they are still lacking in certain areas of most of the businesses are still thinking on moving to the cloud, or they are still comparing the cloud and how they can use it. But when it comes to Salesforce and other cloud systems, they have a very rapid adoption. So also, even within the Scandinavian countries, I see a bit of a difference between Sweden and Norway. So Sweden, most of the customers go with the AWS. They prefer going for AWS. So the AWS have got a good market in Sweden, but in Norway, I can see that most of the customers prefer Azure.
Interesting.
Because So that's sort of a difference also I see in terms of how companies and the businesses are seeing. But overall, in the next 2-3 years, if to predict, I think when it comes to the data, there won't be any questions whether we are going to encrypt or not, as now entire web is anyhow getting into HTTPS. All the data will be encrypted, whether in storage or in transit. So I can clearly see that. And also maybe in the AI and the machine learning side, every single application, every single business is looking some way or the other how they can use this machine intelligence to improve their business and getting more revenue. So those two things will be prime adoption in recent future.
Hey, Thuru, I think we're sort of hitting our time limit here, and we're gonna wrap it up a little bit. Obviously, we'll have links to your blog and to the book in our show notes. But if people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to maybe ask you a question, find you on Twitter, other places you might be available to talk to people?
Yeah, actually, they can really contact me via my blog or just tweet back to me using my Twitter handle through tweets. So I will immediately be responsive on those two. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, we will get all of that in the show notes as well. Thank you so much today. This has been a really interesting conversation. I think it gives us some good insight into what's going on in the rest of the world, gives us some insight into how technologies are being adopted outside the United States, and obviously congratulations on getting the book written. Folks, we're going to wrap it up with that. For Thuru and for Aaron, thanks for listening, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.